Today on Co-op for Two, a spoiler-free review of the 4 mystery suspect games in the Detective Stories series by IdVenture. What puts these games in a class of their own? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome back to another roundup of a mystery suspect series of games, one of my favorite genres. And today I feel lucky because I get to talk about the best of the best in this genre, which are these games by a German company called IdVenture. So let's start with some ground rules. This will be spoiler-free, vague. I'm just going to give you my impressions mostly and tell you some details about why I think what makes these the best of the best. But you're going to have to play them to get any real details. If you haven't, if you're not familiar with this genre that I call the mystery suspect genre, please start by watching one of my other videos where I discuss the genre in general, the details of it. And if you like this stuff, please subscribe and consider, letting me know what you think of this genre, what games are your favorites. All 4 of these I have played live on the channel. They're like 5-hour-long playthroughs. So after you play these, you might want to watch and skim through and see where I veered off, where we differed in the way we played them. Okay, quick recap though of what this genre is. You're typically presented with a cold case or a case that's unsolved, and you're dumped documents, a big set of documents, newspaper clippings, photographs, interviews, scraps of paper that were found, sometimes physical trinkets and props and stuff. Typically, you're dumped them all at once. There's no turns, there's no rounds, no actions. It's not like a board game like that. You just go through the documents at your own pace, at your own order, trying to piece together the clues and the puzzles and figure out what happened. When you are ready, when you think you know which suspect really committed the crime, and that's how these are almost all framed, you very quickly learn a list of suspects. They all have motives and alibis, and you're trying to find out which one of these really did it. When you're ready to solve it, you go on a website, you answer some questions to see if you got it right, and then if you did, you get told the fuller story. The documents are the game here. It's non-replayable because it's a story. Once you solve it, you can't solve it twice, but nothing gets destroyed. You can pass it along to someone else. Okay. Let's talk about this series because it has interesting pedigree and a weird situation for those of us in North America. They were written in German. They're by a German company called IdVenture. They all have this same format, which are these long, slender, unusually sized boxes, except for this one, Death in Antarctica. You can actually get Death in Antarctica in this same format if you buy it directly from the German company or from the English version, the British version of Amazon. This version here was licensed by Murder Mystery Party, and they also licensed Fire and Adlerstein. And there's some minor differences between the the English version localized in-house by IdVenture and the licensed version by Murder Mystery Party. I would recommend the German versions if you can get them, the English localized German versions. But there isn't that big a difference. It's not worth spending additional money for. But if you have a choice, go get these original ones. And if you're OCD, you're going to be bothered by having the one that's the different wrong size. Two of these haven't been licensed. So Adlerstein and Death in Antarctica were licensed by the American company Murder Mystery Parties University Games. The other two, Still Lake and Kaifeng 982, cannot be purchased in America easily. These I got from Amazon UK, which shipped them at a reasonable cost. So maybe if you're sure you want to jump in, you could get all four from the Amazon UK site, or you can order directly from IdVenture. But, you know, these games are all very subjective. So you could absolutely start by ordering one of these from Amazon.com. In fact, Death in Antarctica, I think, but for sure, Fire in Adlerstein, the American licensed versions by Murder Mystery Party, are on Amazon as of December 2021 at some of the cheapest prices of any of these mystery suspect games. So they are a real bargain. Okay, let's start talking about the commonalities between these games, what makes these in a class of their own, and then I'll sort of rank them for you and you can see which ones I like best and why. First of all, these games have slightly different times listed, but they range, some of them are from 90 to 120 minutes. Some of them are suggested up to like 360 minutes or more. They're numbered. This is case 1, Fire in Adlerstein. Case 2 is Death in Antarctica. Case 3 was Still Lake. And case 4 was Kaifeng 982. I wouldn't recommend playing them in that order, I don't think. But if you care about that, they're supposed to be ramping up in difficulty and time length. But I'll talk about my disagreements there. But okay, so compared to all of the other mystery suspect games out there, which are on Amazon, there are a lot of them. There's Unsolved Case Files, Cold Case. There's Hunt a Killer boxes. There's a whole bunch of them. These are the sort of the big boy versions. These are for people who want a richer, longer, more difficult, more involved, more scratch your head experience. And they reward you for that. So in all, I guess maybe we should open one of these up and look at the components first before we get too deep. Maybe let's open up case 1, Fire in Adlerstein. So we're going to look at the contents here so you get some idea of what you get in a box. This is everything I'm going to show you now is what you would see the moment you open this box. So I don't consider these spoilers. If you think that's going to ruin the experience for you, you can look away. All right, so we've got a little introduction. This is the entire rules of this game. It just says, go for it. Try to figure it out. When you're ready to solve it, here's the website. If you need hints, here's the website. Here we've got a fold-out newspaper on newspaper paper. Now, I want to say something about, here's everything about these games are better than everything else in the genre. It's just taking it one step further. So here's an example. Instead of like a little snippet of a newspaper, here's a full newspaper. Most of these stories aren't relevant. The ones that are have been circled. Now, when I buy some games used. When I went into Fire in Adlerstein to play it, the one we're looking at now, I wondered if I had bought a game that someone else had marked up, because while all of these games in this genre have little, like, you know, here's a letter that you got. Here's a notebook, piece of paper from a notebook that you got that's got writing in it. Here's a newspaper. They all use that same idea. But IdVenture went to such lengths to make the things look real that in the other games, you look at them and you're like, well, you can tell that that's supposed to look like handwriting, but it was a font, or it was printed in a way that you could see it's printed. This game, when there's ink, it looks like someone wrote it. And you'll see in the others, like that the ink looks like handwriting. Like, look at this piece of paper that a kid wrote on their stationery. That looks like handwriting. I mean, when you study that, it's very hard to see that that's not handwriting. Like, whatever printing process used, they paid for the upgraded stuff to make it look real. Here's some photographs. We've got some evidence in bags. Like, here's a one with like a folded up little code on it, written code, and it's like folded up with real folding, like a human person had to fold this up. This is just a little level beyond what these other games are willing to do. And you can feel it. You play this game, you feel it. It feels more real. Here's a little paper. All the paper is like, if it's supposed to be on different stock, it is on that different stock. That's a little attention to detail you don't see in some of these games. More photographs. Here's someone's notebook. Again, it looks pretty real. And then we've got a separate set of files here. Okay. Here's a letter from this person who wants you on the case. A little sheet to help you keep track of your notes. And then we've just got a ton of documents here, all in color, all feel different and nice. Some map, lots of details, very dense. Everything in these games is like dense with information for you to really sink your teeth into. Security footage, here's a drawing, again, all full color. Here's a letter that I think you have to cut open. In the letter, there's a little item, little piece of metal, handwritten letter here. More notes with stamps, just lots of attention to detail, lots of dense information, lots of, all these documents are from different organizations with different letterhead, just very complete, no detail overlooked. Again, the writing looks real. Maps printed, notes written on documents. Again, you look at it, it looks like someone's actually signed it. Lots of varied documents of different types. Official reports, they feel real, they feel believable. They've got all the details that would make you believe that you're looking at a real police report. Okay, so that's typical contents of the box. They all are about the same. They all are very dense in details. They're all very generous in the set of documents they offer you. And they really reward digging into, looking for little details, looking for stuff. Okay. Let's put this back. All right, let's go through some of the details and talk about what makes this game series so impressive. Let's start with role of the internet. So this is obviously an issue of contention for board gamers. Most board gamers do not like to have to be involved with an app or the internet. We buy these games because we don't want to play a computer game. So we want to be sitting there with paper and working through it. All of these games, that's what for the overwhelming majority of the game, you'll be sitting there with the documents, spreading them out over the table and studying and discussing if you're playing with someone. But they all have this little gimmick of using the internet at some point in the game, one or two places in the game. You will have to really get important information from the internet. They all use it in a slightly different way. So like you get a tour of different ways to use it. Some might use a Twitter account, a Facebook account, Instagram, just general web searching. They all tell you can go on the internet, search for whatever you want at any time during the case to get information. Much like Detective Modern Crime board game does. But you will rarely be doing that. almost all of your time is going to be spending with the physical documents. But at some point in the game, you will get some information, some evidence that leads you onto the internet. And the games warn you that for some of them, you will need a Facebook account. For some of them, you will need a Instagram account or something like that. So that is going to be annoying. Some people are going to find that a hard pill to swallow, but I think it's worth it. It is very well done. There are some very clever stuff, some very cool stuff. And one of the things that it does really well is that the danger with this genre is you're sort of dumped all these documents, and it's very hard for the designer to set up a sort of arc, a pace of the story where things are revealed as you go, which is something that's satisfying if you're watching a movie or playing a game. And that's one of the ways these games do that, is by having this sort of bottleneck where once you figure something out and you go onto the internet to reveal this other information and clues and evidence and whatever, it feels very natural. It feels very real, very believable. And that has like an Act 2 feel to it. So once you figure that out, and some of the ways that that's done in some of these games is very clever. Some is pretty perfunctory, but some is very satisfying, very clever. And okay, so that's sort of the in-game internet use. This game series, has the best, hands down, explanation of the story when you get to the end. So when you get to the end of these, you're asked to solve the case. In some of them, you're just asked to pick from the list of names who really did it. If you get it wrong, it just says, no, you're wrong, go try again. The American version and the German localized version are slightly different. But basically, you're asked to identify the culprit, and if you get it wrong, you can go back and try to figure it out. Some of these games, you're asked to provide more information than just guessing who the person is. You're asked to provide some information that you won't know unless you really solve it. And so then the internet doesn't spoil it for you if you get it wrong. You can go back and try to do it again. So that's got a nice little lock and key way to find the solution to avoid spoiling it. It also has the best hint system of any of these games. It's a huge amount of work went into providing tons of hints that are gradual in different areas, so that if there's one thing you didn't understand, you can go and get a little hint, your first hint, your second hint, that will just give you a little bit of information. And this is important. Don't think of this as a trivial thing. If you're investing 4 or 5 hours into one of these games, you're really trying to figure it out. You really don't want to open an envelope and get told, oh, you missed it. You missed something, you got it wrong. You would like the game to say, here's a tiny little hint, now go back and try to figure it out. And these games do that. They give you just the nudge you need to make you go back and try to, without ruining it, figure out what you misunderstood. They also have, once you have solved it, it says, congratulations, you figured it out. All 4 of these games then will walk you through the entire case. Every piece of evidence with photos showing you exactly what you could have figured out from each piece of evidence. And mostly we'll talk about why this was a false lead and why you might have thought this, but this disproves it. It's a really enjoyable, like if you've put all this work into trying to understand it, what you get out when you finish it is a full detailed explanation of everything, filling in any gaps you might have had. And you can watch my playthroughs of each of these games where we look at the solutions and walk through, and they're very detailed and very satisfying. So every piece of playing this game feels like a huge amount of work. They're all designed by basically the same team. And the amount of care and work and attention to detail that went into this set is extraordinary, and you can see it everywhere. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the writing. The quality of the writing in these games and the sort of take your time pace to fleshing out the characters is almost all four of these games uniformly good. Like, you get a feel for the people that are involved. You meet people multiple times. It's not hit out of the park in all respects for all of these games, but it is very good writing. Good mystery writing, but good dialogue writing, good, for the most part. All of the documents feel like they're written in the voice of who would write them. It's just, it feels, the verisimilitude is there. Everything feels real and right. It's also heavily leaning on trying wherever possible to avoid sort of silly coincidences that in this genre. It's tempting to make things sort of gimmicky and coincidences that really wouldn't be there in real life. For the most part, these games are very good at not doing that. If there's a code, it's reasonably convincing that a code would be used, or reasonably convincing that someone would do something. The motives are reasonably believable. The alibis are reasonably believable. Behavior is reasonably believable, in sort of a different class than the other games in this genre. There's one of the things I look for when I play these games is sort of subtlety, humor, which you can find in these games. There are moments where you laugh at what someone wrote and said, or the way someone explained something. Like, you get a little flavor of these characters. But then there's also this thing when these mysteries are written, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. When you play some of these games, everything is on the surface, shallow. Like, you see some piece of evidence and you know exactly what it means, you know the relevance of it, and you're done with that piece of evidence. In these games, the work that went into and the success of these multiple reasoning chains that happen, where you figure out a little bit, but you don't quite understand where it fits in. And then later on, you say, oh, that makes a little bit more sense of this. Now I understand a little bit more. The chains of reasoning that are pulled off in these series are so well done and so satisfying. And that achieves a whole bunch of things. First of all, it creates this pacing and arc of an unfolding story, which is super satisfying. It's so fun to sort of get a feel that something is not right about this, but not be able to put your finger on it until you put together these multiple pieces of evidence. Then you start to see the bigger picture. That's what you want in these games. Some of these games do it extraordinarily well, but they all have their moments. And it also makes you feel like you're watching this mystery unfold. Some of these games sort of put you in these unraveling things in real time better than others, but they all have those wonderful aha moments where you finally figure something out, and you have to work hard to figure things out. And that is a mark of success for these games. They also all have documents that you really have to dive into to understand. Occasionally, like in Adlerstein, you feel like, I had to work too hard for this piece of information that didn't feel like I should have had to do that sort of busy work. A lot of these games have some busy work. For the most part, these games don't. Maybe Adlerstein has a little bit of that I would have passed on. What else? They all have aspects where once you figure it out, you go back and you say, oh, that makes sense of this. That's why this happened. So just satisfying stuff like that. The gamey puzzles, they all have a little bit of cipher encryption that you have to sort of figure out. Some is more pleasant than... Actually, most of them are fairly good. The puzzles are fairly intriguing, and the ones that involve sort of running a decryption code are fairly painless. Maybe Adverstein is the one where it was a little annoying, but for the most part, satisfying little side things. But these games lean the least on those kinds of gimmicky puzzles. It's much more of a deep, rich, think outside of the box, figure out what's going on in the puzzle. And I would say in this genre, typically, it's not uncommon for like everyone to have a motive, everyone to have an alibi, and then you have to figure out which alibis didn't work and which one did it. And I think in general in these games, in this series, it tends to be a little more open-ended, like a little less clear that everyone has motive, or a little less clear that everyone has an alibi. You have to think a little bit outside the box and understand a little bit more of a deeper mystery. It's not all presented to you. And so you have to figure out a little bit of a mystery first before you even get to the point of figuring out which of the suspects might be the real culprit. In many of these genres of these simpler games, you know exactly when you've got the right answer, when you're there, and you're sort of along for the ride. This game, you're not along for the ride. You really will have to dig in and figure out what's going on, and you may get it wrong. That's why you have to be careful about looking at the hints when you're ready to solve it. But you could get something wrong. You could miss details. Now, it's a worry in these games if there's like, you don't want there to be one detail, and if you overlook that and you miss that, you'll be completely lost. All of these games are more cleverly put together with multiple things pointing to places. So it'd be hard to overlook one thing and mess up the case. But you are going to be challenged with these games, and they will require you to think outside of the box. And you'll be, I think at the end, you may have a little bit of doubt as to whether you got it right in some of these cases, which is good. That's kind of a good feeling. You want to get it right, but you want to feel like, I'm a little scared to guess this answer because I might be wrong. You will be rewarded for your attention to detail, and you will be rewarded for your time invested in the documents. I already talked about how good the answer system is. They all had fairly satisfying final solutions. So like when you're done, when you understand everything in the case, it's kind of cool. You don't feel like, as with some of these games, it was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous solution, and the only reason I didn't get it was because it was so stupid, because the motive was so ridiculous it never would have happened. These don't feel like that. These do feel satisfying. All right, so let me give my thoughts with as vague and spoiler-free as I can on these different games and where I would rank them. All of them, you can see this, the Kaifeng 982 is got a little heading up top, subheading called History Edition. It does feel different from the rest of these three. It's not a modern day crime. It sort of requires you to go back and uncover a mystery that happened in the beginning of some dynasty in Asia. And it feels different, but it's a complete success. And this might be a reasonable place to start for if you want like a twist on these mystery suspect games that puts it in a completely different setting. This is very good. Not my favorite though. My favorite, I think, was Still Lake in terms of the sort of rich experience of trying to solve this mystery and the satisfying moments. So for me, Still Lake was my favorite. Maybe second from that would be Death in Antarctica. It's sort of a very cool environment with sort of a different twist. Everyone's locked in a certain place. It's just, the setting is good and the mystery is good. Maybe Kaifeng would be my third choice, and maybe I think Fire and Adlerstein my least favorite of all of them. But not to say it's not great. It is great. And maybe because I played it first and I was just understanding what the game was expecting of you. But so for my money, Still Lake, these are hard, Still Lake, Death in Antarctica, Kaifeng 982, and then Fire and Adlerstein. But I wouldn't hesitate recommending you pick up any of these boxes if the only one is available on Amazon for you cheap start with that one. They're all good. And if you're just looking for one slightly different historical one, you could jump straight to Kaifeng 982. These are going to be for more experienced deductive mystery solvers. Others could get frustrated, but for $20, you could buy it, try it, see if it's out of your league, and then jump back to something simpler and come back to it when you develop some skills. Or just play it over. Don't be in such a rush to have it finished in two hours. Spread it over a couple days and take your time. They all play better with having multiple heads brainstorming. These games in particular are challenging, so having multiple players will help. And I hope they make more of these because I'm dying to see what else they come up with. If you like this, please check out you could check out the live stream playthroughs of these after you play them. Check out my other reviews of this genre, especially if you want to start someplace simpler. And I'll see you on the next video.